you that don't know, Don has had some medical setbacks. He's actually on dialysis now since we've last been together. He had to turn. Things kind of went. Talking to him this week, he's had actually some really good response to that, and the doctors are hoping he's actually showing some renal function improving, and they're hoping that they can either reduce the amount of time he has to spend on dialysis, or hopefully eventually remove him completely. It might take a little bit to get there. So Don is his time is now on the dialysis machine. So as soon as he gets done, he's running home. He's hoping to be here 6-ish to join us online. So once Don joins us, we will have 7, and we'll be able to. Doctors are hoping he's actually. We do have a couple of things. I think 4 things to vote on tonight. 3 recommendations from the chairs meeting. We can't really edit those. We can talk about them, but it's a thumbs up, thumbs down vote. And then the operating procedures. But I think we have to have 8 to actually vote on the operating procedures. It has to be a percentage of the total board membership, and 8 gets us there. So we might not be able to do that one tonight, but we can do a second reading and we can vote on it next time. Fran, anything else you can think of we need to cover before we get started?
I can't think of anything other than Don.
All right, make sure if you want to use your mic, you hold down the little push. Does it say push on the front?
Yeah.
And if the light will turn red, and that'll make your mic hot. Just remember, if your mic's on and you whisper and talk bad about me, I'll hear it.
So I say, if you would please give me a heads up if we have a quorum.
We do. Victoria's walking in the door.
Okay.
We have a quorum, and we'll be able to vote on everything. Celeste, how are you, ma'am?
Don.
I'm good. How's everyone doing?
So that's, it's the first milestone.
FRMP were very productive. It was a good collaborative effort. So, you know, like I said at the beginning, kudos. This project has run really, really well.
So the normal process is we pull a sample and it has a 30-day turnaround. That's the normal. We can do a 21 and a 7. But unless we need it to turn around that quick, we don't tend to do it.
Very productive.
Data
It
validation
was a
is
good
normally 45 days
collaborative
to get
effort.
through
So,
it.
you know, like I said at the beginning,
Brian,
kudos.
you can
It
correct
was-
me if I'm
this
wrong, but
project has
we did
run
not
really,
see
really
chemicals
well.
that we didn't expect to see. I think everything we saw was expected. In terms of what? In terms of concentrations, I think there's some areas that were higher than we expected, and just like Brian said, the lateral extent of contamination under the building was not as large as that was thought. And no, to be quite honest. But if we had seen a chemical that no one expected and it made it through validation, then the regulators would know about it also. But Brian, I'm not incorrect, am I? We didn't see any chemical we didn't expect.
You're correct. We did not see anything that was unexpected that I'm aware of. And, you know, I just want to reiterate that again about, you know, the way the lab works is when you have such high concentrations, they dilute that. And so it is diluting all of your results. And so what happens is that dilution raises the detection limits and reporting limits for the data. So, you know, you can see that TCE is very high, but then it gives you non-detects for everything else. And when you look at those non-detected levels, they're sometimes very high. And so it doesn't really tell you, it just says, oh, okay, we don't have this this certain constituent or chemical over this amount, but it still could be there. And that's just a challenge that, you know, we knew going into it. But overall, everything's run well. And yeah, I mean, everything Jennifer said was accurate.
Hey, thanks, Brian and Jennifer. You answered the question way better than I asked it. I appreciate that. Yeah, Phil.
I'm winking.
So you say that you didn't discover anything you hadn't expected, so definitely you would expect uranium to be there. And you saw uranium.
I can't speak to the levels we
Well,
saw
no, I
uranium,
mean,
but I
it
do
said
know
it was
they did
detected.
see uranium in the soil. I don't know what they saw in the water, the groundwater, but I know we saw it in the soil. Okay.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. Then we'll move on to Stephanie Brock. Is she here, Radiation Health Branch?
Fran, she is traveling back from Paducah. I know she was there this week, so I don't think she's on.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Victoria Weeks with EPA comments, any?
Victor. It's Victor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Victor.
I'm Victoria.
Sorry.
Yeah, I don't think Victor's on the line tonight.
Is Victor here?
No.
Okay. And Tim Crayer, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Fish and Wildlife comments.
Tim's not here. Tim's
I
not
don't
here.
believe he's here either. Okay. Are there any other questions that we have for Brian? If not, we'll move on to the presentation on DOE groundwater treatment storyboard. And Buzz, are you doing that?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, good. This is, yeah, I guess I would.
But before you start, I have a question. Do you want us to comment on stuff as you go, or what
Well,
you've done at all?
That's a good question. But I've got like 10 slides, and then we can go back through the slides. You guys have comments on them. You know, because I'll show you the whole thing first, so you kind of understand how it fits together. And then we'll come back and that would probably be best, I think, most efficient. But if folks have something really you want to comment on right away, that's okay too.
So Buzz, Julie's pulling up the presentation right now. It should pop up on the screen momentarily. When you're ready for the video, let me know. The video will run out of here because the sound's better
Okay.
out here. So
Cool.
we'll go back and forth to manage it. But anyway, just to let you know how it's gonna work.
All right, along the way, I got another question for you. Who is the really intended audience for this?
It is, like something that you can put on YouTube, we can put it on the virtual museum, we can put it on the PPPO website. It could end up on Facebook, just anything to go out in public.
So it's intended for anybody,
Yeah,
including a lot of people,
non-technical.
including a lot of people that know nothing about science.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So, anyway, what we're gonna show you is a groundwater storyboard. This isn't the video yet. This is kind of like the plan for the video, how we think it could be laid out. This is a collaboration between, DOE Public Affairs, Jennifer, FRNP folks in Public Affairs. So we kind of looked at it and thought, well, this sounded like a good idea, but we want to know how you guys think how you think it would be taken and, how you think we have the structure right, that sort of thing. So appreciate y'all taking a look at it. I guess with that, slideshow first. And what I'll get to is just this is kind of a kickoff, but we'll get to a video that's kind of one that we want to, what we think would be good to emulate, kind of the feel. But remember slide 2. In 2019, the Citizens Advisory Board formed a subcommittee to consider communicating our environmental successes. And looking for vehicles to do that. Video is how a lot of people get their information nowadays, so we thought that would be a good way to do it. We kind of put everything on hold because of COVID-19. We thought it would be better to meet to kind of go through this, so that was what we wanted to. And so we kind of waited. It's a shame that Cindy's not on the cabinet anymore because she was a big proponent of this and got really excited and got us excited about it too. But what I'm going to show you next is a video that FRMP did, and it is FRMP's this is what they fund from their own money and all. DOE didn't have anything to do with the production of this. It is they had a middle school program, and they thought a great video. And when we saw it, we thought, gosh, that really has a nice feel for it, and that would be something. Just the feel is what we're looking at. So you could play that video there. It's like 3 minutes.
So I'm the Director of Environmental Services for Four Rivers Nuclear Partnership, and we are the deactivation and remediation contractor for the Department of Energy. We do all the environmental monitoring with all the environmental media, air, water, those kinds of things. And then we have all the environmental restoration, all the environmental cleanup activities at the Paducah Gaseous Diffusion Plant. EcoThink is a great opportunity for students to really start to think about impacts and changes that they can individually make and collectively make as far as the environment is concerned. The focus this last year has been on stormwater and just other aspects of how we can make a difference and be good environmental stewards. I think it really makes a difference both individually and collectively is we're thinking about things like expanding neighborhoods or where businesses expand, to be able to think ahead as far as what kind of impacts that we're going to see from those expansions and just our day-to-day activities. So the green infrastructure really is a different way to think about things. And so we're really trying to encourage students to think about projects that they might be able to look at, to work with their school boards, work with different civic leaders to be able to impact things like individually plant some trees or come up with some ideas as school projects. And we really try to challenge them and make them think critically. I think one of the key aspects for me, based on my field, is to hopefully inspire students to be able to maybe pursue a career in something that can help protect the environment, get them interested in doing that early and doing it now.
That kind of a nice feel, but I do have to acknowledge that GLC Maggie Morgan was in that.
Silly little Ava Kelly there.
But anyway, Maggie Morgan had an appearance in that. And those who don't know, Maggie was on the cab for 6 years and she was killed in a tragic car accident, had a child. I mean, a child was okay. Just a kind of sad thing. But that kind of had a nice feel to it. I thought it was. DOE has I'm preaching to the choir, but I think DOE has the technical part of communicating down, but sometimes we miss the personal aspect that, we live in this community, everyone's working at the site, we're the neighbors, we want to clean it up as bad as anyone else does. And so that's kind of what we thought would be good versus typically what we've done is more of a data dump, that's more of a technical kind of thing. And thought if we could avoid that, that might be the best. So, anyway, that's kind of what we're looking for. Keep that in the back of your mind, what we think we're looking for. Go on to slide 3.
Pull your mic a little closer to you. They have the
Wow,
here.
yeah, okay.
Right on here.
Okay.
Yeah, that's much. Sorry.
So, but no, I appreciate
Next people
you
wanted to
coming
hear
in.
what you had to say.
Yeah. So, anyway, the storyboard is divided up in different sections, we thought was a logical thing to do. The discovery, talks about the contamination, where it came from, how did it occur, impact on the community, how did this affect the community, the goals, what's the Department of Energy doing at the site to try to fix it. Then a community testimonial, we thought we had a cab member, someone that is kind of like a local SME, that maybe not super technical, but just someone, so it's not just DOE telling them, this is what we're doing and, trust us and all that. And then talk about, and this is the tough part for DOE, is our accomplishments, because as you know, we do a poor job of talking about what we do. We like to talk about problems and how we're solving problems, but we don't spend a lot of time celebrating our successes. And then the direction for the future. So that was how we had this laid out. These are all very general, so go to the next page, please. You would talk about, and these are real simple concepts that we want to put across, is just communicate about, when the contamination was discovered, talk just briefly about, what's the contamination that was found there, and then, how did it get into the groundwater? Is, what did DOE do? It tells what we did. We did investigations to understand what happened, and Ryan and regulators will definitely pull you guys in on this too. It wasn't just all DOE, certainly. And we provided water to the residents to show that, we were reactive to it. And then we just talk about our, our pumping operations, what we did. Number three, the goals. We thought, you know, how Dave Hutchinson, who was the guy in that video, he really had a nice way about him, I thought. And we thought perhaps we'd use Dave Dollins as our project manager for the groundwater. He's a, you know, or someone that's involved in the community like Dave is, or knowledgeable about what's going on out there. They can just kind of talk about, you know, who he is, you know, involvement in the community, you know, what does he do? Again, all this is non-technical, and you know, just, you know, to connect with the community and what we've done so far to address it. Four would be the testimonial is how we took steps to address the groundwater contamination by providing water supply to affected residents. The fact that we continue to supply water to residents that had their well waters affected. And then thought it would be good to have a CAB member do testimonial, you know. Who is this CAB member? Just he's part of the community, he or she. You know, how does the CAB represent the community and put a voice in how the site gets cleaned up, in particular the groundwater? And how does the community see the DOE's progress, which probably they may not see a lot of progress because we don't talk a lot about it. This is the tough part. I'm sorry, yeah, the accomplishments. That is something that we really don't do well, but we're gonna talk about our accomplishments. So, you know, we've got a lot of good points to talk about. I won't read all these to you, but we pumped a lot of groundwater and we pulled 4,200 gallons of TCE from the ground. That's just from the groundwater. Look, and you know, we shrunk the footprints of the plume contaminations. And then the last point on this really kind of tells me where we've come. You know, we've got we've had contamination levels as high as 10,000 parts per billion on the northwest plume and 1,500 parts per billion northeast plume. Now the contamination's we've had a 97% reduction in the northwest plume in contamination level and a 79% reduction in the northeast plume. So that's pretty good thing to throw about. The next page. Also, you know that the TCE level, this is in the Tech 99. I'm sorry, thank you. It's been lowered below the EPA's maximum concentration. So I think that's particularly talking about off-site. Then just the fact that we're continuing to install monitoring wells to understand the plume and to locate where the concentration levels are and that kind of. Next would be a testimonial for Jennifer Woodard. And you know, she could, some of these points, some of the prior points probably be appropriate for Jennifer to talk to versus Dave, or we could just talk straight out just from the narrative perspective. Who is Jennifer Woodard, how she's involved in the community. You know, kind of the same thing we did with Dave, just to put a human touch on this thing because we all care, everyone involved in this project cares about cleaning up and live here, and you know, it's important that we just get that message across. In the future direction, you know, maybe this is just a draft impact statement from Jennifer. You know, even though we've made great progress reducing groundwater contamination, we know there is more Work left to be completed to reduce the source and level of contamination. And just a commitment statement, DOE is committed to continuing these ongoing cleanup efforts. So, that's kind of the storyboard on how we see it laid out. You kind of see the video for kind of maybe the feel we're going with. We talked about maybe hiring Morgan Freeman to kind of do some of the narration or Sigourney Weaver, but that's been shut down. If you guys could, what's y'all's feel on this? Yeah. And we can go back over the slides too, if it helps.
Yeah, I like the storyboard, the whole concept, and I also like trying to gear it more like that first video where it's kind of a soft video that talks about what's being done. But I think there's some cautions. Go back to the slide that says, the origin, the sources. Okay, I think one thing to be careful about is one, the outside audience does not have any idea what C400 is. So you're gonna have to talk about that as an equipment maintenance building or something of a more generic kind of term. Also, and this might just be something to kind of make it softer, but when you talk about TCE and organic solvent, it might be nice to add something that's commonly used during this period as industrial degreaser. So they kind of know what it is, because they'll see the chemical name, and not understand what it's used for, that's very common at that time. The Tank 99, well, that's a different issue, but something to talk about what the source was. Move forward. Oh, we missed one. Right. Right, okay, I'll remember, just keep going back. Go back to that last slide, had the one bus that was the difficult one. This really is difficult, because you're trying to balance who the audience is, and some people are gonna know what to talk about, some people aren't. And I wonder if there's a way, you know, the 4.6 million gallons is good. But when you talk about 4,200 gallons of TC, well, how much? Okay, that would be a good number to compare it with. Or even the, how big was the original plume? That was down to 315. So I think they need a comparative basis to kind of show that progress. So it's the final number.
Maybe kind of a map or.
Yeah, and I know we showed the rabbit ears on one of that too. But then that last one, nobody knows what a PPV is. And so, and I'm concluding all of us. So I think there's gotta be a different way of saying something about the PPVs or what it means.
Just give the percent reduction.
Yeah, that's the question. Does it matter what the 10,000 went to 336 versus just saying we have a 97% reduction?
Yeah, just the 97% reduction would be a way of doing that, instead of confusing people with PPVs, basically. So that's all this is based on a meeting that Bill and I have been in, when we put together these other proposals.
Yeah, this is great.
And we're trying to get a
I
way
appreciate it.
to make sure that when DOE is presenting something, it comes out in a language that's understandable by a wide cross-section of people, basically.
Anyone, I know, anyone on the video? Anyone, any of our folks watching?
Let's go one more slide, because I know there was another point I saw somewhere. Oh, yeah. What is an EPA maximum concentration level? I know what that is, but nobody else does. Okay, or at least, I mean, not in the general audience. Very few people pick up on that. So I think you have to say something more generic. It says it's below
Regulatory limits?
regulatory limits, something like that. That was it.
Is that drinking water standard that?
Yeah, the MCLs are drinking water standards, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
Training a lot of these things, that's pretty good.
I was gonna more or less say a lot of the same things that Mike was saying. And even some of the things that are not so much acronyms, whatever, when you talk about a plume, again, if you're talking to a high school graduate or a middle school kid or whatever, they may not be aware that, you know, water moves in the ground, and the plumes you're talking about are 100 feet underground.
Not like,
Yeah, smokestack plume or whatever, so you just need to be probably a little more careful on some of the terminology, even the sort of plain English type terminology, just. And then I guess the other thing, like we're talking about the degrees or whatever, on the contaminants, might just say, what they do, you know, their health implications. Calling something radionuclide, a lot of folks think, you know, if you got 2 atoms of uranium there, your eyes are gonna glow in the dark or something, so talking about what this contamination, why it's considered hazardous, or what it can do in very simple, you know, one sentence type terms.
like TC.
Yeah, that's,
Carcinogen.
that's right, human cancer causing agent or something like that.
Buzz, back on the setup slide, it says that, one more up, here, one more, I guess. This one, discovery. It says it was discovered off property. Was that a proactive sampling? Was that a reactive sampling? Like, how close is it to DOE property? I mean, I feel like these are something that a general person who's not familiar with the site is gonna be asking. You know, it's a big difference if it's, you know, 100 yards from the site or 5 miles from the site.
I don't know the answer to that, so, yeah. How was sample discovered and how far from DOE from?
Yeah, just, I mean, are they randomly sampling nearby proactively? Or did somebody complain and it was reactively? It's, you know, one of those sounds a lot better in the story.
Yeah, it's proactive.
Yeah.
Phil, you look like you wanted to weigh in on that question.
Well, I like where you're headed with it. Yeah, the details. I think Mike asked some great questions about the specifics of it, and Victoria too. I live over in Carlisle County. So does that all over to Carlisle County or not? Where is that aquifer? And so, you know, that's the beginning of understanding groundwater. Where is it? And Victoria hit on it right there. And how large is it? People in Ballard County, should they be concerned if they're downriver of that? Or?
So do you think that a graphic showing the plume on some, like shows the landmark like the TVA steam plant kind of would be helpful?
Well,
I think that would be helpful enough.
It might have to go back to a little geology with where the plant sits, and then its relationship to all the other water supplies. I've got a well. I've got a well at my place, 240 feet down, set up on a ridge. So can it get over to Carlisle County? And then the other question, can it get to Cairo on water? You know, where is that aquifer headed?
Yeah, I think that gets back to the audience, you know, again, if you're hoping that middle school kids can get this, a lot of them haven't been beyond the mall. And so they don't have any idea where the plant is or even how it's related to Western Kentucky and the Ohio River or anything like that. So it sort of depends, you may even have to have 2 levels of this, you know, one for adults, you know, sort of knowledgeable adults, and another one maybe for school kids. kids, you know, K through 12 type kids, if you're trying to reach them as well.
Hey, I do want to recognize Liz Wilson. She did a huge part of this work, so she's on the phone. Thank Liz for the work. So, okay, go ahead.
Rabbit ear figure, the original rabbit ear, was that the extent of contamination?
Yes.
It was.
So you know where the boundaries were, you know how far?
No,
Okay.
okay, we're gonna be cautious about that. So you have to understand, when we found the plumes, we had very few monitoring wells. So there's a lot of interpolation that happened in drawing those. So one of the reasons the plumes were defined throughout the years is because we kept adding monitoring wells and reducing the uncertainty. So we don't want to misrepresent either, and that's where it gets hard for us, because if you show the original worst case, it does look bad, but some of that is due to lack of accuracy.
2003 is what you think you kind of hang your hat on.
We tend to go with the 2003 versus the 1998, because we put in more wells to better define it. Again, we don't want to misrepresent, and that's where we get into issues and how we present data.
I understand that, but I'll get back to Phil's question. You wonder, well, how far did it go? Well, that kind of shows what the maximum extent.
I would agree, it probably shows the max with some uncertainty with it. And it depends on how you qualify it in there.
So that might be a way to answer the question. Well, look at that drawing, well, how far was it from the plant to scale it off?
Can I jump in here real quick? Just one more caveat with these maps is what you're looking at, and Jennifer's right. You know, these are based off of data that they get from monitoring wells. And so the closer you are to the facility, the more monitoring wells you tend to have. As you start to go away from the facility, the less monitoring wells you have. But there was an effort, and I think it was with some stimulus money back 10 plus years ago. And they actually put monitoring wells across these plumes. And that's how we're more sure that, you know, that's how far they extend to the east and to the west as you're moving away from the facility. But my point I was going to make is the yellow color there you were looking at, that signifies the MCL, which is the drinking water standard, the maximum contaminant level, and that represents 5 part per billion. So that doesn't mean that that contamination exists. I mean, there still could be levels lower than 5 part per billion that are seen in monitoring wells that don't show up on those maps. But from a regulatory perspective and a health safety perspective, you know, that MCL is there as a precaution. And so that would mean if someone were drinking from those areas, that would be a concern. And everywhere you see the yellow, all of that resides inside of the water policy box. So there are some assurances there that no one is drinking that water. You know, so because I'm sure even though everyone may not be aware of exactly where the site is in relation to downtown Paducah, you know, there's probably a lot of people that know there are homes that are between the river and the plant. And so, you know, one thing I think you don't want to do is cause a lot of unnecessary concern for people. And so it's a daunting task to try to explain the science and explain the safety and all that, but I think it's a worthwhile one. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
I see Judy and Patrick are both wanting to jump in, so you go ahead.
Strangely enough,
today, we had a gentleman at our home, and he asked about whether his well could be contaminated. And he lives on the south side of Highway 62, on Fisher Road. And so I tried to explain to him the geology, as I understood it, of the area and how it went north, it flowed toward the river north, and that he didn't have any concern. And if he did, I'm between him and the plant. So I wonder on that first bullet, if you say, upon the discovery of groundwater contamination north of DOE property.
Yeah, I actually already wrote that down.
Okay.
Just from the conversation, but I agree.
And I also agree with the conversation that it needs to be explained that this is not a huge, I mean, it's big enough area, but it does not cover county. It's limited to a corner of McCracken County.
Thanks, Judy. Hey, Patrick, what's on your mind? Oh, you got a bad mic.
Yeah, so what you're saying is, so are you going to use the map from 2003, or you're not going to use that at all? Because that raises the question.
We plan on using it because we think that's the best baseline map.
Okay. All right, so using the map and then, are you gonna indicate where north, I don't know where north is at, I don't know where south is at.
So north is toward the river.
Towards the river,
When
okay. All right,
we
thanks.
present the maps normally, they have a north direction, and we tend to have the river in the picture at the very top.
Mhm.
So we will make sure whatever map we use is easily understood in terms of direction and all that.
You know, I was just thinking we could even put that plume on like an aerial map, that kind of zeroes in on the site, and then it goes up, and then you see the river, then you see the other landmarks, then it goes up, and you even mark like City of Paducah and Cairo and Metropolis, maybe, then it, that thing will be
Okay.
smaller, that might be.
And that may be the best place to put the groundwater flow. To show that, it flows north from the plant.
So that should, I'm sorry, that should answer, if you did it that way, that should answer people's question who live in Carlisle County or Cairo, that it didn't go out that far,
Yeah.
presumably.
We probably need to show the county lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is not pertinent to this discussion. A natural question.
You have a problem with that.
Is that if I were a kid and I was wanting to be mischievous, I would say, now this is, 140 feet down in the ground. But what happened to all that surface water that goes to the Ohio River? And it does through the big and little bayou creeks. So have we, or has DOE ammunition in their gun to say, we have sampled the Ohio River and.
No, we do not sample the Ohio River
Okay.
because if you sample the Ohio River, you have no idea whose contamination you're sampling.
Yeah.
Now, do we sample our creeks and our surface water? Yes, we do. And Kentucky also has ISCO samplers of our surface water to know what has come off the plant, since we started the environmental monitoring program. But we don't sample the river.
We don't know what's happening in Cairo as far as the water.
Well, even if you sampled, you don't know when it hits Cairo whose contamination it is.
But you have to admit, there's not very many uranium enrichment plants that are between Paducah plant and there, so.
That is true,
And-
but you also have to admit there's fallout that, you find uranium all over the nation, even when there's not a plan.
Okay.
So, but the reality is there's modeling we have done, but, and I may be wrong, and I'll verify I'm not wrong, but I don't think we modeled what we think our contribution might be. But, we don't sample down at K Road.
If I were a fisherman like Billy Bob over there, and probably remember the mercury scare that we had, we came out of Calvert City. Do you eat the fish or not? That was several years ago, that, that's mercury, but, the concept is the same. I'm just kidding, and just hope that you, when you don't have a deer in the headlights, when some kid asks you that, well, how about the downriver?
So Phil, you actually brought up some good points in that, obviously, you always do. But when we started this discussion several years ago, the kind of the buildup and the momentum was that it'd be really nice to see several videos in this series, with the groundwater being the first. But surface contamination and surface water might be one that you could easily do a 2-minute video, a 3-minute video on, just to update folks, and you know,
Right.
maybe other types of things whatever.
Because, the film that was showed, it's of surface water going down the sewer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
One thing you might consider is giving a presentation like this to a live audience, different spectrum of people involved, kids and adults and whatever, before you put it online, because online there's going to be no question and answer available. It's just whatever's there is
Like a test audience?
people try to interpret from it. And so I think if you gave it to a live audience, get some responses from them, you could sort of anticipate what their problems might be with it, or where their questions are, or whatever. And
Kind of do a beta test.
yeah, let's try to beta test it in front of live people so you can see what sort of clarifications you need to make.
Hey, Don, Celeste, I know you guys are with us online. Any thoughts from you guys?
Yes, I have my hand raised here. I didn't know whether you'd see me or not. If you'd go back to board 1, please. In board 1, this is more of an informational question for me. You talk about the late 1980s was discovered during a well sampling event. Had you been sampling prior to 1980 any place? And what precipitated this well sampling event, and why at this time and not earlier?
And I don't know the answer to that, what precipitated the well sampling, or if that was a routine, I don't know.
I don't know what, but I wrote down the questions.
So is this to imply that prior to 1980s, the late 80s, sampling had been done and no TCE or TC99 had been discovered off property?
I don't know the answer to that. We'll have to talk to.
Okay, thank you.
Answer sample. Good point. Thank you.
So thoughts from you guys, if they look for a if they look for a video that meets the tenor of the sample they showed, addresses some of the issues that Buzz laid out. Obviously, we've skipped on the big dollars for Morgan Freeman and invested those in headquarters big shot Jennifer Woodard being in the video. Is that getting closer to what we're wanting to see? Is this, as you envision this in your head, I know there's still some gray area here, but is that getting you in the ballpark where, at least a jumping off point? Buzz, how do you want to go forward from here? Is this?
Well, I think what we'll do, we'll take this information and then this gives us enough, I think, that we can incorporate these comments and we start doing a little creation, do some creative work on it. See what we can come up with.
One other thing.
Yeah.
I like Don's comment because what knowledge I have is that I'm not for sure when the first well was put in, okay? But we did have 3 or 4 wells at one point in time out the plant that they did sample and did it periodically. And then I don't know whether the person, maybe Judy remembers or Bob, requested his well to be sampled.
That's correct.
Just requested it. And therefore, once they measured the contents of that well or the concentration materials there, they were, I think.
You think that's how?
I'm speculating and I'm thinking, my memory's not that good and I wasn't involved in that area.
He is correct, and I can give you the name of the individual if you need it. But, their coffee tasted funny this particular morning, so they called. And, immediately, they went out there and sampled the well and shut it down.
Good information, thank you.
One other thought, and I apologize to Liz, I don't know what her, professional background is. But I was gonna suggest if you do try to do something for like a school kids audience as well as for adults audience, get a middle school science teacher, like someone that I know, who can sort of, review it for you so that they can have an understanding of what the kids' understanding. That might be a good review person.
For a high dollar consultant.
So you kind of see the struggle we have with your comments of how to make it high enough level and short enough to not lose the attention, but yet enough information to put it in context. So it is a struggle. So the input's good. Because too many of us, not Buzz, but too many of us are engineers and view it a little differently and struggle harder with it. But finding that blend is just hard.
I guess whatever we produce will probably be for some, it's just whatever appeals, probably whatever appeals to the greatest amount of people, because for some people, probably say it's too complicated, other people probably say it doesn't have enough.
I do like the idea though of 2 versions.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Good, well, we got enough to chew on, so
Oh, fantastic.
thank you guys.
You can figure out.
Hey, so a lot of folks ask like what the benefit of the board is and what we do. And it's these collaborations and at some point we're gonna have a video that we're gonna roll out. And not only is it gonna be amazing, it's gonna look great, it's gonna be, but it's gonna be something that we can really kind of jointly hold our hands and say, we kind of did this together with DOE and coming to you guys. And that's really the value of the advisory boards, right? Being the subject matter experts on your neighborhoods and your communities and where you live and what's going to resonate with your friends and family, so that it doesn't do us any good to create a video and then everybody looks at it and goes, that's, I'm skipping over it, right? But if you can make it so that it helps, it educates, it informs, it eases concerns, then you've really made a difference, right? And you really impacted things. And so you guys are so good at that. All right, Fran, we're ready to slide forward.
Okay, excuse me. Don, welcome. We're gonna go to the fall chairs meeting that was held in October. And Don and I, the board chair, and I attended the meeting. It was all a virtual meeting, and we had participants, chairs and vice chairs and other representatives of the board from all over the United States that were participating in this. And it was a very good meeting. We had several of the EM individuals and leadership that joined us and made some was Todd Schrader, who's the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Environmental Management. He reviewed some of the past year's accomplishments at the sites and future challenges, including the impact of COVID and the new work environment that was created as a result of it, plus the challenge of many of the workers are retiring now, so they're going to have to be looking at future employees and workers. And one of the major priorities he did mention was the increased outreach to communities to help them transition from the original purpose to the end state. We also had Mark Gilbertson, the Associate Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Regulatory and Policy Affairs. He discussed the importance of transparency, the impact of climate change on DOE sites, safety and health of workers, job opportunities in environmental and nuclear engineering, and the challenge of hybrid meetings. We also had Kelly Snyder, who's the designated federal officer for EM Site-Specific Advisory Board and EM Advisory Board, who reviewed the lengthy process that goes through when a member who's applying to be, well, an individual who's applying to be a member of the board, and explained to us why it takes so long. And in that conversation, she said the process includes somewhere around 12 additional reviewers, just not the individuals in the EM, but also others in various agencies, including the White House. These are some of the highlights of the meeting, and I was going to ask Don if he wanted to add any other thoughts he had, or anyone else that had wanted to offer their insight.
Fran, let me jump in here and just say I echo exactly what you said about each of the speakers. And I encourage any of the board members who have not been able to ever attend a national chairs meeting at some time while you do serve on the board, even if you're not a chair or a vice chair, see if you can tag along and attend. You'll be amazed at what takes place at these meetings at a much different level than what takes place at our local level. But I think throughout the entire meeting, the thing that impressed me the most wasn't necessarily all the speakers, but in the back of the mind, what impressed me was our CAB's board. I guess that's redundant since it says board, our CAB and its relationship with all the people associated with the gaseous diffusion plant. The working relationship we've been able to develop, and it made me feel good, made me feel full of pride at what we have established. And I wish there was a magic formula so we could pass it on to other boards to do that. Thank you, Fran.
I was going to say, Don, you're so right. We are very, very fortunate. And there's one thing I failed to mention is that the facilitator for this meeting was our own Eric Roberts. And he does an excellent job. And we are very lucky to have him with us. Is anybody else that has any feedback that wanted to share their insight?
So Fran, all the presentations that were given are available on the EM SSAB website. So you can just, if you just Google EM SSAB, it'll pull up the DOE website, and you can look on the sidebar. There's a list for the chairs meetings. You can get to any of the presentations. Or if you are having trouble sleeping and you want to watch part of the meeting to help you doze off, they're both days meetings are up on YouTube. And you can just Google YouTube EM SSAB HQ, and you can find those meetings. And there's actually some really good discussions. You can skip through, some of the slow parts. There's some really great interaction between the board members. It's good to see.
Okay, if we don't have any more, comments or discussion on this, we'll move to the 3 recommendations that we have to review tonight and give our heads up on it. The first thing we're gonna do, we had 2 charges that we were given in the spring. And these topics, and I'll read those to you in just a minute, but these were, suggested either by him or the local boards. And they were sent to the local boards, as you probably remember, for our input and that input was presented at the Springs Chairs meeting. Subcommittees were established to develop the recommendations. And then these recommendations were presented at the Falls Chairs meetings and edits were suggested. These edits were made and the final documents that we have in our packet tonight are the ones that are sent to the local boards for their approval. And the recommendations are voted as an as-is, up and down type of vote. The first one that we're going to discuss is on yellow paper. So look at that. And this is charge 1, this is the white paper on public outreach efforts. And this was a committee that I served on, actually. And we were charged with coming up with different ways of identifying outreach practices that for the DOE and the department that they could use as a guide to augment the existing outreach programs and set expectations for the future of these activities. If you will look at that, please. And does anyone take a minute to kind of look it over? I will go over briefly just the recommendations that we suggested, and that are in here. Under recommendation, you'll see on page 2, develop an optimal design and platform for virtual and hybrid meetings and make the most of virtual opportunities. The second was maintain efforts for in-person outreach. Number 3 was outreach should be a mechanism for effective 2-way communication between DOE, EM, and the general public. The 4th is continue to support and improve informational outreach products to engage the public. 5, to continue seeking ways to support and improve the impact of DOE's site-specific advisory boards. And 6, facilitate and support cross-site sharing of activities and public outreach. I'm not as going to go into the details, but if you want to take just a minute to kind of review it yourself, I will, let's do that. And if you have any discussion on it, please voice your thoughts on it.
Hey, while you guys are taking just a moment to look over this, excuse me. Fran mentioned that we had subcommittees participate in this, and the Paducah board had the most members participate in the 2 subcommittees, so it's something we're really proud of. Fran and Victoria participated in this one. Mike and Bill participated in the second one, and a lot of the work that got done on this. Quite frankly, you guys were some of the drivers in getting everyone together and making sure this happened and pulled through. So
you're right. We were fortunate. We had 2 representatives, Victoria and I, on this subcommittee, and then we had Mike and Bill on the second one.
For those following along at home in your members in your board packet, this is on pages 12, 13, 14 of the PDF binder.
Does this require an official motion?
Sure.
You're just gonna call the vote.
Okay, is there a second on that?
Well, I'm just asking, I haven't moved anything yet, but I was just wondering what the procedure is.
Yeah, we'll do a motion in a second.
Okay, I move approval as submitted.
Okay. All in favor of approving this recommendation as presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thanks, Celeste.
We've got everybody. Any opposition? Any opposed?
All right, we will take this recommendation. We will contact head.
We'll go to the second charge. continued strategic vision. And, this is, the wide framework, OEM action. That was the charge. Refer to Bill and Mike for their.
We weren't quite as, formal as the first group. I reckon they came up with a list of things to do, but we got into this, and even though it's talked about the implementation of the strategic plan, Schneider, to give, she really wanted more of a document, how can CABs better operate, how can SSABs better operate, and so we moved away from the actual better, and maybe share. So, things, we were talking about communication, information, well, this overlaps first recommendation, so a lot of it's on communication, some of it's on structure, but it's kind of a smorgasbord of ideas that we had, of ways to make SSABs work a little more cleanly, a little more efficiently. And since Bill and I wrote this, if anybody votes against it, we're gonna get you back.
I like how you guys were asked a question, you're like, we're gonna answer whatever we want.
What?
I like how you were asked. Good. We're gonna tell you whatever we want, we're gonna answer the question. Good student essay right there. You wanted to ask?
I don't think anybody on the committee had actually been at the last SSAB chairs meeting. Or maybe one person had, I can't remember, but so we really didn't have any idea what the charge meant.
Oh, yeah, for that one, for the original.
Yeah, and so that's why we met 2 or 3 times before we actually decided what we were gonna do, because we couldn't hardly decipher what the charge from the chairs meeting actually meant.
I do have a question, please. On the yellow one, number 1, it says make the most of virtual opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And on this one, number 7, it says virtual meetings allow for a lessened commitment among participants. SSAB in-person meetings should be prioritized. A conflict?
Yep. We were answering 2 different questions. And, so.
Let me add to that. First of all, I put it up.
Well, that's you.
But, what we're trying to say is that we live in a world where the virtual meeting is gonna happen, but we wanna try to do what we can to encourage people to really try to participate physically, as much as they can anyway. And the reason there's conflict is I was gonna say something else, yeah, I messed up that.
I tend to agree with you.
Oh, okay.
I don't like virtual.
Yeah. So, yeah, oh, I know what it was. The point of both of these, especially the second one, is these are gonna be recommendations to the CAB, and each CAB will have its own setup, its own procedures, its own manner of operating, its own geographical separation, its own, who's involved in the CAB. For example, in our committee, we learned a lot about Hanford being so much different than what our CAB is, and so we were trying to kind of compromise on some of the statements, what they will do versus what most of the rest of us will do. So whatever comes out of these, it's gonna be ideas from the CABs, and each CAB can either do it or not. So it's not like saying it's a requirement for everybody.
One of our members was from New Mexico. And he said by the time they get a lot of the people from the Indian tribes and whatnot, I mean, they're half a state away. And he said they had a whole lot better attendance at the virtual meetings than they would typically have an in-person meeting just because of the distances involved. And I think that's partly why we sort of worded it the way we did, is that priority for in-person, but still recognize that virtual could have some significant benefits to some of the cabs because of their broader geographic locations.
You remember just a minute ago when Jennifer said sometimes we give directions to her that says, you need to include more information, but don't make it too long, right? And it can feel like it's mixed messages.
Yeah.
I think that's a little bit where we are here. I think the intent of the first recommendation was there are difficulties with virtual meetings. Sometimes engagement's not as good. If you have to use them, find the best mechanism to do it so that the majority of people can be not just involved, but actively engaged and participating. And from what I got for the second one is, that's great and all, but if you can, find a way to be in person. That's the preferred answer. And so by the letter, it can feel like it's conflicting, but I don't think that's the intent of what they're saying. They actively agree with it. Same thing.
Eric,
So
I have
Yes, Don?
I have a question here. I thoroughly support both these documents because I know the time that's spent in them and all of that. My question has to do as we get ready to take a vote and look to send them forward. Are they in the right format currently to send forward as a recommendation? Because as you know, a few years ago, when we had a national chairs meeting, that was part of the discussion. What should be included in the recommendation, some background material, what cabs are, and all of that. So are both of them doable as far as sending forward in their current state?
The text of both recommendations are perfectly fine. They will end up on SSAB letterhead with all the sites across the top and an address line to Ike White as EM1, and then there'll be signature lines added at the bottom from all the chairs, so that they will be formatted and look a little different when they're finalized, but the text and the body of the actual product will look like this, and they should be okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, that's a great question.
I move approval of the
Is now joining.
I'll second.
Any other?
Les, you guys just a second to vote on.
Hello?
Celeste, would you like to vote on this recommendation, to approve forward?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Don,
Yeah.
are you there?
Yes, I am here. I vote yes to forward it, but just let you know that the feed from your end is breaking up by the time it gets to me.
Oh, I apologize. We'll see if we can fix that.
We will move on to the revised member appointment process. That's on your pink sheet. This, y'all know that this takes a lot of time and a long time to get approval for a member application. So there's some recommendations that have come forward on this, and in this past year and a half, it has been a problem for a lot of tabs and SSAB. And some of them have had problems with even holding meetings because they couldn't have a quorum because of the issue of membership or renewal or et cetera. So the recommendation, I'm going to read just briefly what is on here, the 1, 2, 3. there that says the membership review and approval process should include all reasonable activities necessary to prevent lapsed memberships. The site manager should be empowered to temporarily extend the terms of lapsed members in good standing or to temporarily appoint other qualified members to replace lapsed members until a new membership package is approved. Number 3, the DOE should publish the review and appointment process and then take feedback from the public and EMSSAB members. Do we have any discussion?
Does everyone understand what they're saying in that?
In number 3,
Yeah, 1, 2, and 3. So the way we're currently set up is you serve a 2-year term, right? When your term ends, ideally, if you're eligible and interested, we ask you if you want to renew your membership. And previously, Jim would have sent you an application. We would have talked to you and we sent everything in. And sometimes it takes a little longer to get that approved than we would want. And there's a gap period after your term has ended before your new member's approval, and you're with us, but you're not with us, right? And it nearly became a problem for our board September timeframe, but the membership approval came in at the last minute. So what they're asking for in step 1 is if you're in good standing and you're going to be renewed, or we're asking you to be renewed, they want to give Jennifer the power to on her word, like she would vouch for you to set in until we get the formal word from headquarters. Button 2 is if your membership has expired and you put in your 6 years and you're going away and the new membership package hasn't been approved, like we have several in the new membership package now, they're asking that once we've submitted them and the process has started and we know we're all good, Jennifer can go ahead and say, you know, with her blessing as DDFO, those people can start attending, right? So Billy Bob, in this case, if this were to pass and we're accepted and everything were to go forward, Jennifer could just, you know, give the wink and the Bob was on according to this and be a full voting member and be able to step in. And Liz and the other folks in our process. So that's what they're asking for, right? It's to give the DDFO short-term authority to appoint or reappoint temporary members over the lapse. So just want to make sure you guys understood that's what we were talking about. Yeah.
That's one question. You're saying the DOE, are you talking about the DOE department here, or is that done in Washington?
That's done in Washington. So the approval process is done in Washington, right? So when you sign up to be on the board, we collect your application, give it to Buzz and Jennifer. They agree, send it to headquarters, and you actually serve at the, what's the term they use? You serve at the pleasure, yes, of EM1, right, of IQI, right? Yeah, that's all handled out of headquarters, and it's kind of out of our hands. Once Jennifer's gives it the thumbs up and says she's good with it, and we pass it on, it goes to Washington DC and the headquarters folks and all those powerful bigwigs in Washington DC. I keep saying that. We got friends in high places though, right? So they weigh in on it, and then your membership leaves goes to the Department of Energy, higher up, the Secretary's office, it goes to White House liaisons, it goes to folks outside of our little world, because it's a big deal you guys serving on a federal advisory board like this. And so then it comes back, and we're saying if we're in good shape and it's standing and it's going well, then let us have some authority to temporarily appoint you for the continuity of the board. So yeah, so that lag period happens once it's outside of Jennifer's hands.
Well, that takes months, correct?
That's the point.
Yeah.
This recommendation is say, put it back in my hands and let me appoint you and let you serve while it's going through that process, instead of having to make somebody wait till the end of the process to come on the board.
Have a blank space on the board.
That's what I want to make sure.
Does that make sense? I know it's
Yeah,
kind
I
of,
just want to make sure that in the midst, until the final decision is made, you want the authority to be able to go and place someone there until they give the stamp of approval.
That's right. Because right now I can't. We just wait and wait.
So it's
All the
already,
boards want the authority, not just Jennifer.
Yes, yeah, this is for all the boards.
okay, good, that's what my next question.
Other questions? Judy?
About midway down, it says examples of negative impacts specific to each site are attached to this recommendation. Where are they?
So those are being drafted by each side. For us, we talked about it, if you guys remember at our last meeting, we're like, it's a little, the Bill's gonna pull something together. I haven't seen any of them. So I will ask and see if we.
I think he's calling you out.
No, I didn't mean Bill, but I haven't seen any from any of them.
He hasn't seen anything from me either. I apologize for that. I didn't get it done.
But I will ask Judy, and if I can get my hands on those, I will send them to you, to the whole.
Well, I just don't think we need to make a statement if we don't.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
Last thing would be is the one board to write a negative statement. The one. So, other thoughts? What other questions do you guys have?
What is the time frame to get this submitted? Is there one?
They would like it sooner rather than later. You know, and if you're uncomfortable or you think we need to wait and work on this a little more, we can, and we can pick it up after the first of the year when we have our next board meeting. So it's strictly up to you on how you guys want to handle this.
But this is an up or down vote on this.
Right, so we can vote up or down, or we can choose to wait and vote up and down at a later time. Did that answer your question, or was I reading too much into that?
No, well, yeah, you answered my question, because I was just wondering if we want to, possible, I guess my next one is, if once we submit it, then we need to wait on approval from Washington,
Yes.
and that could take time.
So this is, what this will do is this recommendation will give, so there are 8 boards across the country, right? And we are considered, even though there are 8 locations, we're considered one board, right? Jennifer is the CFO for this board. She's the federal officer. And Kelly Snyder is the DFO. She's in charge of all 8 boards collectively, right? So under the big umbrella. This will give Kelly and Jennifer the kind of stick to go fight with the folks above them and say, we want this authority, right? This is, the boards want this, we would like it, and it's kind of a use to express your opinion to headquarters, if that's your opinion. But that was the intent, is that it would give them something that they could stand on to say, this is what we want. Does that help? No, go ahead. I love your questions.
So are we wanting to submit all these recommendations together, or whenever we?
They will go in separately. But this just give them a permission to say the Paducah board supports this document. And they will go in after all the boards have had a chance to vote whenever the cycle comes through. Portsmouth is probably not having a meeting because they're caught up in this. They're probably not having a board meeting for another 4 months. So it might go without Portsmouth because they can't. We have 3 board members, right? So I can't pass a recommendation with 3 board members in Portsmouth. We're doing other activities with that group, but I think we'll see.
Are there any other questions?
Those were good questions, Patrick. Did that answer everything you had, or do you have other things you need to? Okay.
I move approval of the recommendation on the member appointment process as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, any opposed?
And the next bullet item there is the letter that I had not completed dealing with Judy's comment about,
Okay,
you know,
okay.
evidence about how it's impacted local cabins. I will get that done.
The next item on the agenda, and we're getting toward the end here, is the revised operating procedures. And that is in your packet again. And this is the second reading of this, with all the suggested edits that made from the first review. Do it. And then we'll take.
You guys are looking, the current operating procedures that we function under are about almost 12 years old at this point. And it was just time to read through and update some things. Things have changed with headquarters, things have changed with how we did things. And so we want, so Fran and I were talking. One of the things we really want to try to, was our intent when we made these revisions, is that the operating procedures are intended to empower you to do work, not to be a limiting document that creates a process that makes it hard for you to work, right? So we try to take out any, you must do this and do this on a certain, and put that, and just said, you know, the board will collectively decide to pass a recommendation. And this is the number of votes we have to have, right? So we try to clear up some of those directives so that you could operate as you felt best and not let process dictate how the board works. We wanted to really, it's kind of how we operate anyway, but we wanted that to be reflected in the operating procedures to let it really empower you guys. And so that's what you're going to see. We streamlined some stuff, took out some ambiguous language, and hopefully made it has gone through headquarters review, and they'd approved it. And so it just took a little while for us to have board meetings to get it back in front of you. So we've done a first reading. This would be a second reading. And after the second reading, you can have a vote. So it takes a little bit of a larger number. It's 2/3 the majority of the board. So we have to have 8 positives or in the positive to pass and amend the operating procedures.
Eric, may I speak?
Yeah, sure.
Eric and I had a wonderful conversation the other day about this document. I think the important part for us to remember, it is a working document, because within this document are methods to change if after a year we come across items that do no good for us, seem to maybe like spinning your wheels in mud, because sometimes language change. We discussed the word diversity. There was a time when a cab could be an all-male board. All of a sudden you add 2 females to it and you're diversified. But if you really think about what diversity means in 2021, that's not what diversity means anymore. And so vocabulary will change over time. And so this document allows the ability to also change over time. But I have no problems in accepting it in its current form.
I have one comment, and it may not even justify any sort of change. On page 4, under item B, vacancy. As soon as the vacancy exists, follow completion of the board member's term, and it seems to me when we were talking about this new member appointment thing, we sort of talked about maybe submitting the nomination packages like once a year or something like that to sort of facilitate the process going through rather than doing onesie twosies here and there. That item under vacancies, item B, be changed just a little bit maybe for that reason, or?
I think it's up to you. As I read it, it says you may nominate someone, which gives us the option to do that. If we chose to, even though it might be our preference from an internal structure to do a membership package every 2 years. and create classes of board members so that it's easier to train, orientate, and get folks up to speed. If you guys were all to walk outside and, you know, get hit by a bus and we had to replace like 9 board members, we might want to change our system, right? And so that gives us the ability to do that, is how I would read it, Bill.
Well,
We can do it however you want to do it.
the only thing I would change from that would be, instead of saying as soon as, you might say when a vacancy exists. Because as soon as
Okay.
puts an element of urgency to it that when does not,
I think that's a good point.
in my opinion. And, I mean, if we're gonna do every year or every 2 years, just to add classes of members to make it easier to introduce them and whatnot, that might.
I don't see that as substantial, so that should be an easy change. Yeah, so that's good, yeah.
Put it on the fly.
Any other thoughts or comments?
Okay. Do we have a motion to accept the, procedures, revised operating procedures?
Do we do that at this point at the second?
Yes, we can. What we'll do is if everyone's good with the edit that Bill suggested, we'll change that as soon as to when. And so,
And the motion, do we have a
motion to approve it, yeah.
with the edit?
Yep, yeah.
As revised.
So move, Murphy.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second,
If-
Reggie.
If we edit it, does it become a first reading?
I don't think so, since it's a minor change. If we were making something substantial, then we would probably go forward. But I think we're good with this.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody ask them, we'll say it's a typo and I misspelled when. Does that work? Are you comfortable with that, Don?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just making sure. I didn't want to put you in a spot where you weren't comfortable.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion to proceed as edited.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay.
So we will get on this, we will get Jennifer's signature on this and we'll see it edited. Yeah. Place it on the web, everywhere else we have, so it shows this is our actually document. Copy to Kelly.
Eric, let me know when the documents are ready for my signature also.
Perfect.
Okay, we're down to public comments.
We did not receive public comment.
Pardon me?
We did not receive any public comments.
Right.
If you would like to comment on anything you've seen or heard tonight, you can still submit in writing, submit it to me. Please put public comment in the subject line of your email, and we will include your comments as provided within the minutes of the board meeting. So,
Any further comments from the board?
Don, you're sounding pretty good tonight. How you feeling?
Oh, I'm feeling fantastic. If you had seen me a month ago, when I was laid low in the hospital, and where I am now, I am doing tremendous. The only reason I'm not there in person is by the time dialysis is over on a Thursday night, by the time I'm at home, it's 6 o'clock. And so it's right now easy for me to come this way. But I am making tremendous progress, and I thank you all for keeping me in your thoughts.
hey, it's because you're young and hip with your headphones and your hoodie.
Well, I haven't put the hoodie up here. Let me put the hoodie up.
Love it.
Okay,
If we can't see you, frozen.
with the hoodies on.
Well, I can see you moving. I'm not sure why you're frozen there, but
Actually, Don, you look really awesome.
Thank you, Fran.
I hope I did you proud.
You did, ma'am. Thank you very much for stepping in there for me. I appreciate it. That's one of those tasks for a vice chair. You never hope to have to do it, but when it comes along, I knew you were well qualified to do it.
things are done a little bit different than what I'm used to in my past life, but I'll get the hang of it, but I hope not too often, because we want you back.
Well, thank you. It's just good to see the board members there and just to hear their voices.
We second that.
Other thing, perhaps if we take a couple minutes and have Billy Bob and Liz give a little bit of background about where they're from and what they do and whatnot. We'd like to get to know them just a little bit.
Go ahead.
Okay, generally, I don't need a microphone. I don't have an inside voice. But, hey, I'm, born and raised here in Lone Oak and went to high school there. Did different things. I've been a member of Pipefitters Union since 1979. I've got Q clearance and went to work at the plant. In 1989, they started hiring a big new replacement group of operators. So I hired in for the USEC, Mark Marietta, so on, as an operator and worked Cascade. I worked shift for 27 years, and now when we shut down, I was part of cell treatment project. And now I'm one of the health and safety officers. DOE allows us for every 100 hourly workers, we can have a health and safety officer, and I'm the second of 3. So, we were just about to 400 number, and now we've had a little setback with the COVID and retirement and different things, so we're not quite at 400 now. I don't know our exact number. But, got 2 kids, I'm a grandpa, and got another one on the way, so my wife can't think straight. So that's where I'm at in life.
Awesome. It's great to have you back.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So the thing Billy Bob didn't tell you is Billy Bob's one of our instructors for our Haswalker.
That's right.
Training.
I do. I work with the USW out of Pittsburgh, and I teach Haswalker class at our Union Hall, and we're going to expand on that this year. We're going to teach RCRA waste, and we're also looking down the road of having a rad tech training here. That's not my league, but I think we're going to teach the health physics folks, so of our people. We have a hard time with, rad techs, as we call them, health physics people. They travel. So they make, like some of the travel nurses, they make some unbelievable money. Well, they don't want to come here. And now that we've accepted them and they're part of our union, that cuts down on the fact that they can make $60, $70 an hour or whatever some number would be, that they have to come work here, and we can't get good people to stay. So that's a big holdup in the teeth on our gear of getting work done is having enough HPs to go out and support the work. So it's a program that we're looking at doing through the USW and under close guidance of permission and all the things that it takes, just like it takes so long to maybe become part of this setting. It takes that long. It takes a long process to get other things done too. So, it's a good group of people out of Pittsburgh, and I've traveled and been to different places, got to go to Hanford, a little Billy Bob from Western Kentucky went to Hanford. So that was quite a showpiece out there. And I'm real southern, as you can tell. So they just, it's embarrassing sometimes. It's just what I gotta live with.
Yeah, I think we all do.
Hey, Liz, are you still with us?
I am. I had to go mobile. I was picking up the kid from her after-school activity.
Oh, no sweat. So, you want to give us just a quick who you are and introduction on the amazing life of Liz Wilson?
Sure. So I guess I got connected with the board working for the DOE contractor, PredaServe. I was an administrative assistant for a year, and then I supported Buzz doing public affairs, and just fell in love with the cab and the amazing people that are on it. I now serve the community through Lotus. It is the Sexual Violence and Child Advocacy Center for the Jackson Purchase region. I'm the Sexual Violence Prevention Coordinator there. I guess my education background is in public affairs. I got my master's from Murray State University in organizational communications, focusing on public affairs. I have one 10-year-old. She is currently doing gymnastics, so that was where I was at when I switched from Teams to my cell phone. And yeah, that's a pretty quick rundown of what I do and who I am.
Awesome, thanks.
You don't have the accent like Billy Bob, are you not from Lone Oak?
No, I am from Marshall. So I grew up in Benton in Oak Level, and I currently live in Calvert.
You could hear a little bit of the southern end. Benton. Oh, one syllable. Awesome. I can't wait to have you on the board with us. We're looking forward to it, Liz.
I'm excited.
We do look forward to having you, Liz, and Billy Bob.
All right.
Is there any other comments or thoughts or anything you want to share?
Hey, let me just remind everybody one more time, there is the envelope in the back. If you want to participate, we are collecting money to make a donation in honor of Reese Butterball, who is Eric Butterball's daughter that they lost this week, an infant daughter, lost at birth. And so there's an envelope back there. I don't feel obligated, but if you feel led to contribute, let us know. Throw some cash in, or if you want to bring something by the office later on, that's cool too. We'll get that squared away, and we'll contact Cindy Butterball, who's Eric's mom, and see where would be a good place to make a donation in Reese's. So make sure we had some folks sneak in. We'll make sure everybody knew we had that opportunity. All right. Board members will gather for an educational session December 13th. Look for details on that later, for each specifics. But mark your calendar, pencil in December 13th. Billy Bob, Liz, make sure you write that date down. We'll include you guys too. So we'll send all that out shortly. Anything else?
Anything else? If not, adjourn.
All right, Julie, you got it?
No, I'm good, okay.